Okay, so the other day we did talk about Vancouver Canucks forward Conor Garland and the idea that I had been seeing a bunch of people discussing as to whether or not he could get traded to the Calgary Flames. Now, that was just an idea. It was tossed around there. I saw some Canucks Twitter people talking about it. But in today's video, we are instead going over some rumors that were brought up by some other more informed people. Not to disrespect the Canucks Twitter fanbase, but there was a segment by Elliotte Friedman done on last Saturday's headlines as to where he feels Conor Garland and his trade discussions are going. Take a look at the video published by Sportsnet. This is going to be linked in the description if you want to listen to it. Also going to be linked in the description is this article on Nashville Hockey Now, published by Michael Gallagher. The reason we're using this article as well is because, of course, Friedman mentions in the Saturday headlines that the Nashville Predators are indeed one of the teams that he feels could be targeting Garland, alongside of the Winnipeg Jets and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Also written about in this Nashville Predators article is what Friedman said in the 32 Thoughts podcast recently as well. One team I'm curious about here is Nashville, Friedman said in his 32 Thoughts podcast. I'm not saying it's going to be them, but I've kind of wondered about them. For one, they have cap room. For two, they're looking for that kind of player that would fit with Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett. Vancouver is going to have to incentivize this. There's a couple of teams telling me they're going to have to keep at least 30% of Garland's salary and see what other sweetener is there. I had a couple people tell me that of all the teams that could make sense, it could be Nashville. And so, with this in mind, there is a discussion brought up on Nashville Hockey Now as to which players could be involved in this type of a trade. I will give props to Michael Gallagher, because what he does is he puts himself in the perspective of the Vancouver Canucks writers and says, yeah, the Canucks are looking for a right-handed defender. And if that is the case, Friedman reports that the Canucks prefer a defenseman in return, of which the Nashville Predators have many to choose from. Tyson Barrie, Alex Carrier, Dante Fabbro, and Jeremy Lauzon are four options at the NHL level who could step in and help Vancouver immediately. Now, I'm not going to say that Tyson Barrie is going to be the biggest of all fishes to catch here, or that Dante Fabbro still has the amount of pedigree he had accomplished back when he was a prospect. But when it comes to right-handed defensemen, these two are kind of right in that mix. And when it comes to the salary, Tyson Barrie is making $4.5 million to the end of this upcoming offseason, so that's a little bit of cap savings against Garland. Dante Fabbro is signed till the end of this season as well, making $2.5. What I wanted to do in this video was talk about these two guys and then just kind of go over a few of the other ideas tossed around in the article, because, of course, Fabbro and Barrie are the two guys that I feel have the most pedigree to their names. Let's start out here with Tyson Barrie, because amongst these two, he is the one that makes probably the least amount of sense in my opinion. We're all familiar with Barrie and his profile. He has been linked to the Vancouver Canucks in trade rumors spanning back to 2017. There was a video we made back then talking about Barrie for Ben Hutton, but that, of course, did not manifest itself. Tyson Barrie is an offensive guy, and he has made his bread and butter being that power play quarterback. This was highlighted at its peak in his 48-point year in 56 games in 2020-2021, where he actually led the NHL in defenseman points, but didn't get any Norris consideration. So that was the first time in years that happened, but for Tyson Barrie, he has still mostly been just that power play, puck-moving type of guy. He scores a few goals once in a while, but at his peak, he could be a 40-50 point defenseman. He had a few higher point productive years back in the day, but look at that, 57 points, 68 games played in 2017-18 with Colorado. That was a while ago. And ever since then, Barrie has been with the Maple Leafs, the Oilers, the Predators. Last season with the Preds, he had 12 points in 24 games after getting sent over in the Matthias Ekholm trade. So if you assume half a point a game pace, let's say 40, 45 points, that's what you're kind of getting here with Tyson Barrie. The problem, though, with this type of player is that the Vancouver Canucks, you could very well argue, they don't need him. They don't need somebody who is going to be an offensive dynamo because they already have Hughes, they already have Hronek. Hronek is also on the right side. If you make this trade and you have yourselves a D-core that looks like Hughes, Hronek, Myers, let's say Ian Cole, Carson Soucy, and then Tyson Barrie, you're sacrificing a lot of defensive capability on that right side. Tyler Myers is already a little bit shaky defensively, and if you're playing Hronek with Hughes, that leaves the rest of the bottom of the lineup a little bit more vulnerable too. Now I guess you could make the argument and say, oh, let's just play Cole with Myers so there's a little bit of security there because Cole's pretty good, and then have Susie, who also has a strong defensive edge, playing with Barry. Therefore, it all balances out, and you have more of a diversified skill set on your blue line. And even though in theory you could say that makes sense, I feel like it'd be more profitable for the Vancouver Canucks to take somebody who is more defensively minded, like a Chris Tanev, like we had talked about in the last video. That's the trade idea that I think makes the most sense out of all the ones that we have been tossing around there. But that's kind of why I wanted to talk about Dante Fabbro as well. Fabbro is also a right-handed defenseman on the Predators, and he's been interesting over the past few years because he's actually from Coquitlam. So just around there in BC, this guy, Burnaby Winter Club, Dante Fabbro, is a local. 25 years old, a little bit bigger than Tyson Barry, and he was a first-round pick back in 2016. The thing with Fabbro is that back when he was in the NCAA, he was an absolute monster. Point-per-game stud as a blue liner, captain of BU, but he never was able to become what we thought he would be for Nashville. It's been a few years, and he hasn't broken out into that bona fide top 4 point-producing guy who could just do everything right. You talk about other NCAA defenders in this sort of era of the NHL Draft. 2017, you also had Cale Makar. The year before that, you had Charlie McAvoy. So this is kind of the territory of defender that we were expecting a Fabbro-like player to be able to be when he was drafted initially out of the Penticton Vs in the BCHL. So not to say that there is no hope for the guy. He's still 25. He is still an NHL player as it is. It's just there is a ceiling that I think has not fully been uncovered here with Fabbro over the past few years for one reason or another. He has been not really relied upon in the ways that we thought he could have been. If everything worked out for Fabbro, he would probably be, let's say, a 40-50 point consistent defenseman right now, maybe something like what Tyson Barry is, while also having a solid two-way and defensive game at the same time. This is why I'm leaning Fabbro. Also, he is a lot younger than Tyson Barry, which makes it a little bit easier to get on board with that. But just with the profiles of the guys involved here, if you traded away Conor Garland for Fabbro, you're getting the most cap savings possible, and also getting the guy who has a lot more to prove in the long term. Let's head back over onto the article to see what it says right here. It talks about Garland, speedy skater, high motor. It also talks about a few other guys that the Predators have in their prospect route. Jake Livingston, Spencer Stastny, Mark Delgaizo, a few other guys that could be interesting. I mean, Ryan Ufko, Luke Prokop, but of course none of these guys are NHL caliber players at the moment. The rest of the article, though, just kind of goes over Garland and what he could be for the Nashville Predators. If you're a Preds fan, then let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of Conor Garland heading over to your team? And this is an interesting question, but what is the salary retained number that you would feel comfortable to make this trade work? Do you even care about salary retained? The Predators have cap space, but Conor Garland's making $4.9 million until the end of 2026. So is that the type of contract that you want to retain a little bit on in order for you to accept it? Do you think the Canucks need to hold on to $1 million, $500,000, whatever? What are your thoughts about the contract situation here? Because there would be some good cap savings if the Canucks trade Garland away for Barry or a Fabbro. Also, if you see this type of deal go down, how does that impact the rest of your lineup? What do you think about the way your decor looks if you get rid of one of these guys? And do you think there needs to be some sort of a sweetener? Friedman alluded to that idea in the 32 Thoughts podcast, but if it is just Conor Garland straight up, is that enough to get it done? If it's Fabbro or if it's Barry coming back the other way? Do you guys even value Barry all too much? He was the main piece of the Ekholm trade. So, is Barry all too much of a hot commodity that he would be justifiably worth something in this type of a deal? If you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Out of these names that were mentioned, Tyson Barry, Dante Fabbro, even the prospects, Luke Prokop is in there. What are your thoughts on any of these guys coming back in a Conor Garland trade? And would you actually prefer this to be the return? For me personally, I still like Chris Tanev. I'd still like the idea of Luke Schenn, honestly, coming back because that guy's a Predator too. But because the article didn't go out there and mention Schenn, I didn't really feel like it was necessary to bring up. But, you know, if it is Schenn, if it's Garland for Schenn, I kind of like that a lot, but of course there would need to be a little bit of a sweetener on the opposite side because Conor Garland is making a significantly higher amount of money. But thoughts in the comment section either way about this Garland and Predators idea. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.